This is Dr. Bev Knox, and you are listening to my psychology tutorials. Learn psychology while you sleep. Let us review some basic concepts in ethics, religion, and sexuality. The term ethics is used in various senses. First and most fundamentally, it refers to the right or wrong, the good or evil of behaviors. Sometimes people use moral in the same way. Second, the term ethics also refers to a system of principles established by some particular group. We might talk about Roman Catholic ethics, for example. We use ethics when there is a conflict between things we prize or desire highly. Sexual pleasure may be an important value for one person, but something to be avoided for another. However, regardless of the importance we attach to sex, we need a way of integrating our sexuality into our patterns of decision making. To do this, we use such categories as right or wrong, good or evil, appropriate or inappropriate, and moral or immoral. These are the kinds of distinctions made in the field of ethics. Since we use them every day, we are all particularly ethicists. Religion enters the picture as a source of values, attitudes, and ethics. For believers, religion sets forth an ethical code and provides sanctions, which are rewards and punishments, that motivate them to obey the rules. When a particular religion is practiced by many people in a society, it helps create culture, which then influences even those who do not accept that religion. Therefore, it is important to study the relationship of religion to sexuality for two reasons. First, it is a powerful influence on many individuals. Second, it often shapes a whole society's orientation towards human sexuality. With these ways of looking at sexual ethics as background, let us examine certain great ethical traditions to see how they deal with norms of sexual behavior. Although some attention is given to non-Western sexual ethics, the focus here is on ethical traditions of Western culture, primarily in the United States. This culture can, at the risk of oversimplification, be seen as originating in the confrontation of Greek culture perceived and developed by the Romans and Jewish tradition extended by Christianity. From that point on until rather recently, Western culture was Christian, at least officially. Even self-conscious revolts against Christian culture in the West had roots in this pervasive tradition. Let us review classical Greek philosophy. During the golden age of Greek culture, covering roughly the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, brilliant philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle pondered most of the great ethical questions. They regarded the beautiful and the good as the chief goal in life, and they admired the figure of the warrior intellectual who embodied the virtues of wisdom, courage, temperament, justice, and pity. While nothing in Greek culture rejected sex as evil, the gods and goddesses of Greek mythology are often pictured enjoying it. They thought that virtue resulted from wisdom, and they believed that if people could achieve wisdom, they would do what was right. And people fail to live morally only because of ignorance. To achieve wisdom and cultivate virtue, violent passions must be avoided, and these might as well include sex. Plato believed that love led towards immortality and was therefore a good thing. However, since this kind of love was mainly intellectual and more like friendship than sexuality, the term platonic love has come to mean sexless affection. There was also, especially among the warrior class, approval of a sexual relationship of an older man and a younger one. The older man was to serve as the younger one's teacher and model of courage and virtue. An army of male couples was thought to be especially fierce because the desire for each to protect his beloved. Later, Greek philosophy became even more aesthetic than that in the Golden Age. Sex was seen not necessarily as evil, but as less important than wisdom and virtue, something to be transcended to achieve the beautiful and good. Such thinking was pervasive in the late Roman Empire. The basic source of the Judeo-Christian tradition, which is the religious foundation of Western culture, is the Hebrew Scriptures or the Old Testament of the Bible, the basis for Judaism and a major source of Christianity as well. Based on ancient traditions and written between approximately 800 and 200 BCE, the Hebrew Bible has a great deal to say about the place of sexuality in human life and society. The view of sexuality in the Hebrew Scriptures is fundamentally positive. In the Genesis account of creation, we read, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them." Human sexuality is not just an afterthought, it is an integrated part of creation, which God calls good. Judaism sees sexuality as a gift to be used responsibly and in obedience to God's will, never as something evil in itself. The command to marry and to procreate within marriage is clear. Looking at the Hebrew Scriptures as a whole, we can find three themes in this view of sexuality. First, sex is seen as not just another biological function, but as a deep and intimate part of a relationship between two people. The very ancient story of Adam and Eve states that a man leaves his father and cleaves to his wife, and the two becomes one flesh. Biblical Hebrew uses the verb to know to mean sexual intercourse, as in Adam knew Eve and she conceived a child. It also uses the word knowledge with this suggestion of deep intimacy to describe the relationship between God and God's people. The use of sexual imagery in describing both marital and divine human relationships testify to the positive view of the Hebrew Bible towards sex. Second, in the Hebrew Scriptures, sexuality should never be separated from its social consequences. Historically, Israel began as a small group of nomadic tribes fighting to stay alive in the near desert in the Arabian Peninsula. Sheer survival demanded that there be plenty of children, especially boys, so that there would be enough herdsmen and warriors. Furthermore, because the tribes were small and close-knit, sex had to be regulated to prevent jealousy over sexual partners, which could have divided and destroyed the group. It is not surprising, then, that so much of the Hebrew Bible is concerned with the laws regarding people living together in society, that these laws often include the regulation of sexual practices. Finally, the Hebrew Scriptures see sexual behavior as an aspect of national and religious loyalty. when the Israelites settled in what is now known as the State of Israel about 1200 to 1000 BCE, they came into contact with the original inhabitants. Like many agricultural people of the time, they encouraged the growth of their crops through their religion. The sexual regulations of the Hebrew Bible need to be seen both in the context of the times and against this historical background. From Israel's struggle for survival during the nomadic period came institutions such as polygamy, which is many wives, and concubines, which is slaves kept for childbearing purposes, designed to produce children in the case of childless marriages. From the confrontation with the fertility cult, Israel derived prohibitions against nakedness, cultic prostitution, adultery, and incest are threats to the harmony of the group. Bestiality is not only unnatural, but also non-procreative and may have been a feature in Canaanite religion. The menstrual taboo is typical in many societies. It should be noted that all societies have had laws regulating sex. The Judaism of the time was legalistic, displaying high regard for responsible sexuality as a good part of human life. In fact, the Songs of Songs, part of the Hebrew Bible, is an enthusiastic celebration of sexual romance with no reference to having children. Now, as this discussion turns to Christianity, which grew 3 centuries from an obscure Jewish sect in the dominant religion in the West, the complex conditions of the Mediterranean world between 100 BCE and 100 CE must be noted. The world in which Christianity developed was one of tremendous ferment in the affairs of philosophy and religion. There were many cults, often characterized by some sort of dualism. This is the notion that body and spirit were opposed to each other and that goal in life was to become purely spiritual by transcending the physical and maternal side of life. Public morals were notable decadent, and even ethical pagans were shocked by a society in which people, or at least those who could afford it, prized physical pleasure above all things. Christianity is distinctive among the major world religions in insisting on monogamy. The Christian standard of monogamy, which may seem strict by today's standard, may be viewed in another light as a major step towards equality between women and men. Men were no longer permitted to have many wives as possessions. At the heart of the Christian scriptures are the Gospels, which describe the life and teachings of Jesus. Because Jesus said almost nothing about the subject of sex, it is difficult to derive a sexual ethic from the Gospels alone. Jesus' ethical teaching was based on the tradition of the Hebrew prophets, and his view of sexuality follows in that tradition. He urged his followers to strive for ethical perfection, and he spoke strongly against pride, hypocrisy, injustice, and the misuse of wealth. Towards sinners, including those whose sins were sexual, the gospel showed Jesus as compassionate and forgiving. He did not put any particular emphasis on sexual conduct, apparently regarding it as part of the whole moral life based on the love of God and neighbor. Luke 7:36 through 50. Ethical issues involving human sexuality have provoked sparked lively debate. The rapid development of sex-related technologies poses challenges in sexual ethics. A possible resolution in the conflict between the old morality and the new morality involves an ethics of human sexuality that takes seriously the historical tradition of ethical thinking while insisting that decisions take into account the specific situation.